We found another one, another playable character, guys. We are beyond blessed to have Mike Hobart on today. One of my good friends, one of the smartest people I know. The guy can talk to you about anything, and he even says it in the interview. He just from a young age really got good at talking, just loves to talk, and he's serving all of us well with that skill. That's for sure. Not everyone can talk like he can. Some people can, but they talk about a lot of nonsense. Let's be quite honest. Mike knows a lot about a lot, so there's no nonsense going on here. Straight orange pills left and right, straight signal. One of the smartest, but also kindest and empathetic people I know, and that's one of those things. Army engineer and just a brilliant person all around, and it can talk to you about dang near anything. So buckle up, get ready. A true playable character, someone who can think for themselves, is not afraid to say what they think. Mike Hobart, enjoy. Mr. Mike Hobart, thank you so much for coming on, brother. And it's been a little bit in the making here, and I appreciate you coming on and exploring, I guess I should say, giving us some of your wisdom today and exploring, really, I guess, nutrition, health, the body, and how that coincides with Bitcoin and your story, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. No, it's more of an honor for me to get invited onto like doing this with you, and like because like I think I mentioned it with Opti and Nico, like one of the first times I spoke with them on Simply, is like I don't reach out to any of you guys to do a podcast. And it's not in the sense of I want the ego feed as far
Mm-hmm.
as like, oh, I'm wanted. Like that's cool. Like I obviously I experience that, but it's
Yep.
more of from a sense
Human.
of, yeah, it's more of a
Yep.
sense of from it's an honor to be requested by like yourself and everybody else that has had me on their podcast, because it's like, oh, like that means that there's something or a discussion that wants to be had, and you for example feel like I am, for whatever reason, a good source for that conversation. So like, dude, I'm just honored that you asked me to do it. So
Yeah.
let's get into it.
Yeah, 100%. And I actually made a note of some of the different pods you've been on and stuff. And so we can kind of touch on a little bit of that. We can kind of take it where we want to go too, because I know you do talk about the health, fitness side of things a lot. Obviously, that's where your expertise is, and a lot of your knowledge, a lot of your time over the years has been spent, which again, it's a what better way, right? Your asset you have, right, is time, or your body, like those assets that we have that we're given as gifts, and so many of us either treat it poorly, or quite honestly, there's a couple of reasons which we can explore here of why is that the case. Why do we have fiat foods? Why are people have these terrible choices, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
reasons that food's too expensive, so farmers are doing this to the food and putting in worse ingredients and doing things to keep the prices the same, even though, because inflation's running the prices away, and then people are having to choose, what do I do, fast food, or what am I doing here? So I think that's maybe a place to really kind of start, as it pertains to how the money is truly corrupted. I guess the fiat currencies are corrupted, and giving us this system where we have these, it's picking the lesser of two evils, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we can actually, so I'll provide you 2 points and it can work as a fork in the road. We can go whichever way you want. So first would be what we were just talking about before you hit record, with regards to maybe not opportunity cost, but the costs of receiving dividends paid out on any investment that anybody's going to make. Um, Unfortunately, we're at a state right now, at least here in America and in the Western developed world, where most people aren't investing in themselves or in their future. They're just seeking instant gratification, and that provides a problem in the sense of, if you're going to invest in your future, whether it's investing financially in markets, whether that's Bitcoin, which we would obviously prefer, or you're investing in something like real estate or the S&P or your 401k, your IRA, or my personal favorite, like personal development, which would be something more along the lines of like working out.
Yep.
You have to get to the point of understanding that the instant gratification system that everybody is stuck on with the fiat hamster wheel, it's those two don't mesh. That's not a gear system that meshes really well, because like whether you're investing in Bitcoin or investing in real estate or investing in your own personal development and picking up a workout routine, those dividends aren't going to be paid out to the point of like serious return on your part, um well past a year of like consistency and follow through. And I don't think enough people today are people
Have that
today lack
patience.
the they lack the experience of understanding that, and then they also lack the education of that from whether it's their parents or the education system, which is failing everybody, or the government or their employer even. But then there was another aspect that I kind of wanted to touch on, and I'm slightly forgetting about. But there's a fork in the sense of, so you can have the aspect of getting the dividends paid out, or you can have the aspect of,
Hey, really quick, I want to annoy the hell out of you with a quick little break to just remind you that we have to share the signal within the noise because the algorithm hates truth. The algorithm hates truth. So we have to do all that we can to spread the signal. The faster we do that, the quicker change comes to the world. We need to be the change we seek to be. What are we doing? What am I doing? What are you doing to build a future? Also, if you want a written version of a lot of what we do here, please go to the description and find the link to our blog, our Substack, as well as you will see many links to either the work or the companies, the places you can find all the playable characters here that we talk to and how you can connect with them. So now back to the show. Thank you.
let's just leave it at that. I because like there was another aspect to it, but I'm honestly pulling a blank on it.
Yeah, we were talking about the just how the fiat is making everything run away from, whether it's farmers putting the worst ingredients in the food.
You just sparked it back with the farmer stuff. So there's another natural aspect to what's going on with regards to the fiatized foods and all these other systems, which I've talked about. I talked about at length in my essay that was featured on Zero Hedge, where I talked about the real American conspiracy being an idiocracy. There's a very natural aspect to humanity and like organic life in general, to where we as humans, like we'll just talk about from the human standpoint because we are the dominant species on this planet. We are incentivized as organic biological life to seek out efficiencies wherever we can find them. That can mean, as like these food companies working with the industrialization in the modern era of using technology to try and produce a product for cheaper and cheaper costs that people still purchase. That is a natural aspect of both nature and economies. Like, you want to keep scaling to the point where you can produce a product that continues to bring in cash flow that people want and they keep coming back for. Now, the problem is that, as we know, as you and I know, is that system can lead to outcomes and decisions that are not necessarily healthy for the long run, right? That would be where, when McDonald's first started, it was all really natural, healthy food products, like the Angus beef or whatever they were using to make the quarter pounder, like the butter, all that stuff. It was good back then. Even though it was fast food, it was not the fast food that it is today. Fast forward to today, where you're using all the seed oils and all this other stuff because it's cheaper to get and cheaper to make, and people are still paying the cost. People need to understand that is a very natural pendulum swing. Like, everybody does it. Just like with people. So I keep speaking in this mic. I got to figure out where the balance is. People need to also have the grace and understanding that when it comes to individual choices for day-to-day lifestyle, like activity, again, going back to around the same time frame, or like we can go a little bit farther back, because I think McDonald's started in the 60s or something like that. Maybe it was before that. Yep. But let's go back to the 40s or the 50s. Like, all these pictures that we see of everybody out at the beach, nobody's obese, everybody looks great, all this other stuff. A natural progression of industrialization in the modern era is that we can get more done with less effort. That means that not like the majority of the people out there that are in the working or the employment like world, they can get more done with less physical exertion, which means less calories spent, less activity for the body. That means that the body is going to start packing on fat weight if you continue to eat the same way. So people need to also understand that because we are in a modern world and we have these efficiencies afforded to us, that complacencies are easier to fall into. So like when people are, I used to be one of those individuals. It was like working out. It's like, stop being a lazy piece of shit. It's not that hard. But people need to understand, because like now I take a different approach to it. It's like, I understand why you're having such difficulty of adopting this, because it is very much an addiction. Like it's an addiction to complacencies. Yeah. Well, I don't have to go out and deadlift 300 pounds. Why should I? It's like, well, okay, I understand that you can get your income and everything, but you're not doing what your body was built for. And if you're not taking care of your body, what does the income matter?
Yeah.
Right. And then that you can tie that into Bitcoin. Like, it's really easy to tie into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is all about first principles thinking and everything. If you're not taking care of yourself first, what is the point of trying to take care of somebody else? Now, obviously that gets a little different with parenting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But with regards to Bitcoin and an economy, if you don't take care of the middle class and the lower class, in the sense of allowing them to have a facility where they can save income, any sort of excess income, whether it's 25 cents or $25 or $2,500, it doesn't matter. If you're not taking care of your economy in the sense of providing a financial vehicle to just simply save and put off to the side, that is not going to be debased by the aspects of monetary inflation, which would be monetary debasement. If you're not allowing for that, you're going to see the wealth gap continue to grow wider and wider, because not everybody has the same opportunities to produce a investment or a product that pays itself off in dividends and yield later on.
You think, what is your putting your tinfoil hat on a tiny bit? How much do you attribute the simulation, the matrix, purposely, doing this, right? Or do you think this is more of like a, hey, because I go back and forth on this, is it just like, hey, because of the incentives, the people at the top are going to continue doing these things, and it's not a grand plan. It's just the company is trying to do what's best for them and make a profit. And the guys at the top are like, hey, well, I think I'm doing the best for what we have at our disposal. Do you think it's more of that? Do you think there's the people at the top that are really like, is Bill Gates like, I'm buying up farmland so I can do this to the population? Or is it, hey, these are just all the incentives because of the broken money? This is going to continue getting worse naturally because people think they're doing the right thing in a fiat system. That's why this fiat system is wrong. What do you think in those terms?
I think it's fun to put on the tinfoil hat and to talk about how there's a guiding hand destroying everybody and everything in its wake. I think that the reality is, and like, me, man, I'm always adherence to nuance and everything. Yep. I think the reality is that if there's gonna be people like that, it's pretty unavoidable that there's gonna be people like, for example, Klaus Schwab, who are going to have ties to certain groups of individuals that have a historical precedence of sacrificing the large majority for gains for the very few. The group of people that I'm referring to rhymes with the word SWATsies, and everybody should be capable of understanding what I'm getting at now that like that's out there. But I think the reality is that most of these aspects, like when that article that I referred to that got featured in Zero Hedge, I personally believe that it's more of natural incentives and very, I think people are just operating within their small window of life. Because like when you look at, like, for example, you look at somebody who has a job, say you're an executive of a central bank or something like that. You are incentivized to do the best you can for that job, to make income for the bank, to continue operating, to justify paying your wages and all that other stuff. You're not incentivized to think of what the effects are on the middle class or the lower class, or even the individual. This is like, it's an aspect of, like, another great way to think about it is in the Army. Generals can't think about the individual. They can't.
Yeah. Because
when you're commanding, like, say you're commanding like 10,000 guys, you can't be concerned about Bob, the private, who has, to deal with a divorce back home, because there's like 500 other Bobs in the unit. Like you like, it's a different level of calculus. And now, not a whole lot of people are going to really appreciate that, because like less than 1% of the population serves in the military.
Right.
But when you're thinking about on the levels of a country, you can't afford to think about every single individual that is on the street that is struggling to get by. Like you can't. They're just different levels of math. You have to think about how to steer the country in a way for as many people as possible can benefit and prosper. And I think when you bring those two together, and then you also include how the fiat dollar operates. And then you just have those three, and those 3 points, that's the flywheel that the fiat hamster wheel makes. Because when you have a currency that you can print at a whim, and you have individuals making decisions from up on high that can't think about the individual, that's just a flywheel decision making that continues to like reward the lower and middle class less and less and less. And like I think a lot of like, and that gets to the point of where it's an incentive mechanism that continues to produce bigger and bigger negatives for the larger and larger majority. And I think a lot of people, that takes a lot of emotional and psychological, I don't want to say wisdom because it sounds conceited coming from me, but it takes a lot of emotional.
It's like EQ, emotional intelligence. That's
yeah,
truly.
and like it's difficult both in cognition to think of all these points all at once feeding into one system. Mm-hmm. But it's also difficult in an emotional sense of accepting that somebody isn't incentivized to care about you. And there's a lot of people today that like to, I'm sorry, spout a bunch of nonsense thinking that everybody should care about everything. Human beings we're not built like that. You care about what is within almost your immediate proximity.
Yeah.
Like for example, you go away on a work trip from your wife and you're gone for months at a time. You're going to maintain contact with her because you have the close relationship with her. But if you guys didn't know each other, like you had just met, and then you go away for months at a time, you're not incentivized to continue to care about them. Like, why? They're not impacting your life in any way. Yeah. So like when you have all these like political movements that are virtue signaling that they care about everybody, it's like you guys got to realize it's a bunch of nonsense. Like they and it's not a cynical sense to say that they don't care. It's just like that's the reality.
Nature. Yeah.
Like you have to be interacting with people on a consistent basis to have the rapport and the relationship to actually care about the well-being of those around you. And that's where like Bitcoin also feeds back in. You can talk about the beef initiative and all this other stuff mm-hmm. of like building these networks of people where like you go out and you shake a rancher's hand. Like you establish the relationship to the point of where they're giving you great beef in exchange for having the relationship and your Bitcoin. Like that's the trade-off. But I think the breadth and depth that social media and technology has allowed for communication has duped people into thinking that there is some sort of secret sauce to caring about everybody.
Man, that's so well said. You lay that out beautifully. And I think that like the crazy part is like we talked about EQ and you're humbly saying like, I don't want to say it like that, but I mean, we all have that ability. And I think that's what we talk about a lot of these things in spaces, obviously, but like the higher faculties that God gives all of us, the perception, will, reason, imagination, intuition, memory, like all those things we have. And yet none of us use them because fiat makes us get on that hamster wheel every single day and got to punch in, got to punch out. Now I'm tired. So I don't turn the game on and, forget the kids are there and then get up and do it the next day. And there's just no brain activity going on up here, no true thinking, not using your intuition. And that's what you basically explain like, hey, Mike's over here using his intuition, using his perception, using his higher faculties because he's had the time and took the time to step back and start putting all these things together and even opposing views in his head at the same time. And the average person's just like, what? Like,
there's so many things that I talk about and say that I don't fully believe. Like they're like, and I can't remember who said it, but it's like, it's a mark of intelligence to be capable of holding opposing thoughts in your mind and not like be completely invested into either one.
Yep.
And it's just,
it's a sign of genius to be able to do that truly. And you're right. I heard that from Nolan Bowerley, but I forget who it is. It's some well-known person. I forget who it is though now. And
I want to say it's a philosopher.
Yeah, I believe it is. And they were saying one of the signs of genius is being able to hold opposing opinions in your head at the same time. It's we've just lost it. We have the ability to do it, but society has just kind of like rooted it out of all of us.
It's a practice skill.
It is. It's
because it's not like I was just born capable of doing this.
Right.
Like the best way to learn how to do it is to have these conversations, these complex conversations with multiple different individuals who have like varying and differing opinions, and you hear them and they're going to make sense, and yours is going to make sense.
Yeah.
Somebody's is going to make sense more than the other, but it doesn't necessarily mean either side is explicitly wrong.
Yes. It's the nuance, right? Like you talk about a lot, right? The nuance. There's the nuance, and that's at the edges where you're learning and refining and polishing, and that crucible. Man, so interesting. In saying that, there's a couple things. I remember like a couple months ago, you saying one of the spaces that it was, and I forget exactly what it was now, but the premise was, hey, parents, like it's on you, the kids, right? Like it's about the kids, right? It's parents. It's on the parents.
People were asking. So I said it I reiterated it to you guys in a Bitcoin space, but then it was actually the impetus was from a differing Bitcoin space where we were talking about just like the complications, the difficulties with America proper, and particularly the education system. And we were talking about all the problems, and then somebody on the space was like, well, okay, guys, we're talking a lot of problems, but what are the solutions? And I was like, I said, it's on the parents, and I received immediate vitriol and pushback. They're like, no, it's not the parents. It can't be the parents. I'm like, the parents are what makes up the vast majority of the participating governmental body. Like, who are the teachers? Who are the politicians? Who are the executives? Who are the individuals that are making the most purchases in the economy? It's all parents. It has to be parents that are making the changes. And they're at least they're at least doing the work to help like build into the changes as far as like receiving the dividends back for their work.
Yes.
And a lot of that, and unfortunately, going back to like the fiat hamster wheel, it is very, very difficult for parents to take on that little bit of excess load, because the average number of homes per dual adult household is 2.3, which means that the vast majority, there's at least one individual working 2 jobs while the other one is working like 1. And there's not a lot of time to be a quality parent with that. And it's not even just time, it's also like the energy, like the emotional, the cognitive, the physical, and the spiritual. Like when you're working some deadbeat fiat hamster wheel job that like doesn't give you the returns as far as like purpose and meaning, like when you engage in that activity for 8 hours a day, it is exhausting, because all you're thinking about is like, I would just much rather be doing this and this. And like, it doesn't feel like it's that demanding, but the brain takes up 25% of your caloric expenditure.
Wow.
Like, and so when you're thinking about this stuff all day while also trying to perform a job, it is literally exhausting. And it's not just exhausting in the physical sense, as far as like, you know, the energy take as far as like carbohydrates and stuff, but people also like, I don't think they're aware. I don't want to say they're ignorant, but they're just not aware that like when you take in food, your body has to spend energy to send signals. Like you think about flexing your calf. Your body sends an action potential in literal fractions of a millisecond down to those muscles to prep them for flexing, for contraction. And that's before you even move it. And then it spends energy to send the signals to move it. And then you're also spending energy to actually move the muscle. So like when like people need to understand is like when you're stressing out about stuff, it's exhausting for a reason, because it's consuming energy. So like when we're talking about all these issues of parents needing to like do more, like it really gets down to doing like the economics of like your time and your effort throughout your day. Is it worth me to work a job that I hate to make income, to pay the bills or to be able to go on a vacation? Or is it worth my time to work a job that is probably more aligned with my purpose and my meaning, take a little bit of a pay cut, But then, and maybe you're living below your means for a while, but then you can be a quality parent and help raise your child to be a better individual. Like, which is more worthwhile? Because I can tell you right now, like, as someone who was obviously a child at one point, I probably would have enjoyed having my dad around as a kid for like those periods of 6 to 9 months when he was doing nuclear power plant shutdowns as a pipe fitter. I probably would have enjoyed having him around more than like, getting the Star Wars toys every couple of months. And that's not a dig on my dad. Like that's not because like that's fair for any parent to like
Yes.
do those things. But I think that there's a lot more people making those trade-offs now. And then they're wondering why their kids are growing up to the point of being like addicted to like screens and social media and stuff. It's like, well,
and pills.
Your kid's 3 years old and you're babysitting them with an iPad. Like the iPad is more of a parent than you are right now.
Wild. People are worried about AI and like robots. Like, dude, take a walk around a city and watch people glued to their phones and their screens and the tablets. We got robots everywhere, guys. We got drones all over the place. And
it's difficult for me to like even talk about this stuff because it's hard for me to stay away from a screen because there's so much information that I'm learning from that's on the internet. Like,
yep.
It's really, really difficult to pull yourself away. Like we are like even our eyes, like just think about our eyes, like we are designed to take in as much information as possible. There's a reason why it doesn't feel natural to just like not stare at a single point, because when you stare, you can just like, you can tune out and like your eyes will glaze over. But to focus on one single point for a consistent amount of time, our eyes are designed to bounce around to all sorts of points of interest to like we can take in our spatial awareness and everything. Screens give us like so much information between like the light that's coming in, like the blue light that's coming in, keeping you awake, like the words on the screen, the advertisements on the screen, the movies, emojis. It's there's just a lot that people aren't taking consideration of.
It's so wild. It makes me think of, and we touched on this a little bit, just again, some of your expertise, and just history in the, health, nutrition, working out. What made you get back into that? So I know obviously just recently that's where you're have shifted some more of your focus into that world and kind of getting back to that. I don't know if you'd say, roots, possibly some of your roots in a way.
I mean, like those roots go all the way back to being 15. So yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, what fostered that change just in the recent months, really in the last few quarters of saying, hey, I'm going back this way?
It's actually been building for quite a few years now. So I went to college for exercise science, and before I could finish getting my degree, like right as my senior year was about to start, is when I deployed overseas. And I realized when I was deployed overseas, like talking to the guys in my unit, that's where I really started to bridge the gap on like how integral and important physical health is with regards to, nutrition and like making sure you're eating good stuff, but also being active and giving your body the stimuli to like elicit growth adaptation responses, which sounds very, very technical, but that just means growing muscle and getting like healthier, fitter. But I started to realize the synergies across the board. Because I was reading more and more about like the studies about how physical activity helps with like depression, anxiety, ADD, like all this other stuff. And really starting to bridge the gap and like, oh, okay. So it has these many positives. We have public health legitimate pandemics as far as like depression, anxiety, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, like blah, blah, like all the way down the line. Atherosclerosis, osteoporosis, all of it. And then I continued to go just down that rabbit hole of thought. And I'm like, God, dude, like we like in the Bitcoin community, we talk about the problems afforded of like via fiat currency and just like these broken incentive mechanisms and stuff. But then like even talking about the incentive mechanisms like immediate gratification, this has been a 7-year long process of just like this rabbit hole getting continually more compounded of like just my realization is I'm like, The squat rack and the barbell can teach so many philosophical lessons in life. And I believe that one of the reasons why so many people are completely disconnected from these philosophical lessons is because they're not getting this firsthand experience. Like when you're underneath a barbell and you're trying to squat 225 or like 315 and you want it bad, but your body is not strong enough yet. So you have to continuously struggle and fail up until the point of where your body adapts to where it can handle that load, and boom, all of a sudden you're capable of doing it. There's so many lessons in that individual interaction. It's like, oh, so like I have to fail in order to succeed. Yes. Yes. That's exactly what it's telling you. Oh, and like in order to succeed when I'm failing, I also have to make sure that I'm getting good resources for my body to grow back stronger. It's like, yes, it's exactly what we're saying. Oh, in order to do that, I also have to get good sleep. Okay. Then if I get good sleep, then I'm in a better mood. If I'm in a better mood, I can think better. And if I can think better, I can do better work. It's like, huh. Pretty strange how that all works together really, really well for not just like an individual, but a community and an economy, isn't it?
It was amazing. And you think about I've never thought of it that way, but they're so true. Like you learn other things like discipline, right? Like the discipline, the consistency, the persistence, the physics. Like, hey, if I throw this up on my shoulders and I just let it go, I'm going to kill myself or whatever, like it's going to land on my neck. Like you learn a lot.
Yeah. And you also learn risk mitigation.
Yes.
Like if I can't squat 225, I'm sure as hell not gonna be able to squat 315. And if I'm gonna try and push for a limit, I need to make sure that I'm doing things in a proper technical form, to the sense of if I hit a limit, I need to have a way of getting out from underneath it without not only damaging myself, but somebody else around me.
Yes.
There's a lot of lessons that a barbell and a squat rack will teach, man.
Man, oh man. It's so true. I mean, you look at, we just mentioned, the pill usage, depression, all these things that are going on. It's like, man, you can't help but feeling the squat rack, the barbell, that a lot of these things can be cured, gone if people got under that barbell, right?
Well,
or got in the gym.
So you brought up depression. I'm glad you did, because I actually struggled with depression from the point of, I think I was like 11 years old to like 27. And what I learned, because like it wasn't until like I was 21 where I really started trying to figure out what I was depressed about. And the depression was leading to an aversion of difficulty, like really falling into complacency. Depression was leading to like this like predominance for complacency. And then the depression was getting ratcheted up because I acknowledged that I was capable of acknowledging in my 20s that I was just like doing all these complacent acts to avoid, the discomfort of doing difficult things. I was just a habitual quitter. Like as soon as something got difficult, I'm like, I don't want, like, it's not worth it, which I think a lot of people do nowadays.
Yep.
And as I started to just like really allow myself to sit at home alone and think these things through while all my friends are out partying, getting drunk and getting girls, I'm sitting at home alone trying to figure out why it is I feel the way I do. And I got to the conclusion that the depression was really getting ratcheted up because I couldn't complete the tasks that I wanted to. And at this time, I was seeing a physician, and we tried like one of those SSRIs, like antidepressants. And that was where I really connected the two dots between big pharma and a lot of these problems. It's like when I tried it for like, I think a week, and I was like, this isn't fixing anything. This is just making me numb to the world. Wow. Like I'm like these SSRIs, I was like, it's making me sleepy all the time. Like I don't get excited for anything. Like I'm not interested. I'm like, this is making my depression worse. Like,
isn't that Brave New World? Aldous Huxley, right? Like I think it was 1984. Like they just give the pill, you sedated, and like,
or The Giver. The Giver's a good example too.
Yes.
where like everything's just a malaise of grays.
Yes.
It's not like there isn't even blacks or whites. Like there's because like
Wow.
like there was no contrast. I just didn't want to do anything. And like gaining that experience, I was just like, okay, so it's not that these are a cure. They're not actually fixing anything. They're just masking the signaling mechanism. So instead of your like you're feeling the depression and knowing something is wrong without knowing what the solution is, they're just like, okay, we're just gonna screw up the signaling so you don't feel like there's anything wrong at all.
And that's, and to my understanding, Mike, that's actually what is like chemically, that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's doing.
Wow.
It's getting in. It's this as the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor is just making it so that there is a higher amount of serotonin in the synaptic cleft to the point of where, because like there's a natural process of like when you get exposed to dopamine or serotonin or any of these other neurotransmitters, they get released to the synaptic cleft and it causes these reactions where like dopamine is like, okay, euphoria, you feel like you're on top of the world and all this other stuff. But then the body will naturally clear that out like once it's done. But the SSRIs, they make sure the serotonin stays there. So it doesn't get reuptake or cleared out of the system. So it feels like you have a higher consistent exposure to it. And that obviously brings on other problems because the body is designed to build up tolerances and all this other stuff. But yeah, like, so people don't realize that like that's a vast majority of the pharmaceutical industry. Like they're just hijacking the body's natural signaling mechanisms to tell you that something is wrong and something needs to be changed, just so you can afford to just sit there in your complacency and not feel like you need to change something. And that's also why I wrote for my Substack that like I like the solution, like the real prescribed solution to like, in my opinion, to like these ADD problems and these ADHD problems and these anxiety problems and these depression problems is that a lot of us just aren't doing what we need to in order to get the solutions that our body and our minds are trying to tell us we need to do. It's like when, like I'll ask you for example, with anxiety, when you're anxious about something, what's the best solution to it? Do you go out and use like drugs in order to hide that feeling? Or is the best solution doing even just a little bit of work towards the actual solution to your problem? Because the anxiety is going to be because of a problem. It's like,
yes,
like
even something even you're people, like trying to get away from, and like you need to do it and you're not doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Yeah. Because even people with like chronic anxiety, there's going to be a reason you're experiencing the anxiety. Are you experiencing chronic anxiety because you're naturally an introvert and you feel like you have this expectation to be extroverted? That can be a source of anxiety.
Yes. But
there was a quote that I saw on an Instagram reel the other day that was like perfect in the sense of people are conflating, for example, like on the topic of anxiety, people are conflating emotions with reality. Problem with that is emotions are based entirely off of perception. If you perceive that the actions that somebody is taking are negative, you're going to feel a negative emotion. But if you perceive it in the sense of where it's not necessarily targeted at you, like you're not the subject of whatever is going on, your emotions are different because you're perceiving it in a different way and you're reacting in a different way. And we're getting into like some psychological stuff that I'm not necessarily credentialed enough to like make comments on, but these are just observations that I've made personally. And I think because of what I write about and what I talk about, like a lot of people are affirming that I'm correct in these assessments, then I get more and more comfortable talking about the observations that I make. And I don't like, we've gone down some rabbit holes. I don't even know what the topic of the discussion was that you wanted to talk about today. So
yeah,
like, if you
honestly,
have anything,
I don't know how we got here, quite honestly, either. I mean, but to your point though, I think that is how everyone really should be kind of talking in a way, right? Is their experience and what they've seen firsthand, or maybe kind of like exposed to someone dealing with that. And really that's how it should be, because that's where cognitive dissonance comes in, right? Where you're like mind reading other people, you're trying to like stretch way out there. Like you said, if someone's here and you just met someone and then they fly off to Texas the next day, like there's no like connection there. So like I don't really care what they're doing because I don't really know them. I just met them, so like there's this dissonance, there's and that's what we do with our minds too.
And there's like, and I talk about a lot of conflations with regards to people. Not caring about somebody isn't hoping for or intending ill will on them. That's something that I think people need to wrap their heads around. That it's like, just because I don't care about you doesn't mean I don't want good things to happen to you. I just don't give a fuck about you. Like, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes, just because I don't put a black square on my Instagram doesn't mean I don't like you, right?
Yeah, like any one of the listeners for this podcast, like when you release it, 99.99% of them are going to be people I don't know, and they're not going to care about me. That doesn't bother me. If that bothers you, I'm sorry, but the way that you're looking at the world is wrong, and you need to change the way that you're looking at the world. Because like, if you're expecting people that you've never met or never interacted with to care about you on an intimate level, that's a level of entitlement that is disgusting.
Yeah, well said. Well said. It is, and it's the hard truth, right? Hard realities, hard truths that used to be more or less common sense in a way. And again, we've gotten so far removed from because of the fiat system, and Bitcoin truly can fix all that and start writing and aligning all those incentives, because we've gotten away from that, right? We're just on the hamster wheel, like you mentioned earlier.
And that's the thing with Bitcoin, is it incentivizes cooperation rather than like explicit damaging competition. Mm-hmm. Right? Because there is also, and this is where like your experience as an athlete, competition doesn't necessarily mean hatred for the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can be on the same, like I could be on the hockey team with you, and I could be competing with you in the sense of like, we're both building off of each other. Like, as I get better, it pushes you to get better. Like, nothing about competition has to be broken down to strictly like kinetic altercation. That doesn't make sense.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. There's a common theme, I would say, through every time you're on Spaces or just your talks, everything. I think, I don't know which one it was you're talking about, people, maybe it was the one you did with Opti, even the TTO, maybe, where you're talking about, hey, people in Bitcoin, a lot of people tend to be, especially in Spaces or in Twitter, tend to be fighting age men. Kind of that crucible. Alex, talks about all the time, Stanzik, the crucible, and men feel this need in naturally to want to be tested, right, and forge themselves some way or somehow. And we've lost, and like you said earlier, we've kind of lost a lot of that. The barbell teaches a lot of people that's kind of like that forced, crucible where you're forging yourself, and we've lost so much of that. Some of the articles you've written, stuff like that. Is that something that, just like you said, was it something learned over time? You started to kind of realize, like, man, we're missing this in society. Like, this is what needs to happen. Were you always kind of that way? Did you grow up in a military family? Like, how did you kind of come about just the way of thinking, I guess, and just the crucible itself, and kind of understanding it and talking about it and writing about it?
Oh man, that's a really good.
That's a loaded question.
That's a really good question. It's like, it's so good. It's actually giving me goosebumps thinking about it, because as a child, I early on, like, my family has like reiterated to me many times over that as a kid, when I was younger, I was a ball of energy. I was always smiling. I was always happy. I was always competing. Like, I remember specifically playing like, flag football in elementary, and t-ball and basketball, and all this other, like, competition was very much a part of me. I was the second fastest kid in my school, just behind this kid that was half black, and he had just beat leukemia. So I'm like, oh, wow. I can't compete against this. But I loved racing against him. Like, I loved like wanting to try and be better than him. Like, I always had that competitive streak in me. But then when I was about 11 or 12, that depression state hit, because I experienced just a real quick primer to this. through my childhood, my parents were grinding the entire time. My mom was working at a bank, going to night college, and then my dad was also doing the pipe fitting stuff where he was gone for 6 to 9 months at a time.
Wow.
So my sister and I spent a lot of time being like some of the first ones into daycare in the morning, some of the last ones to leave. And then on the weekends, like I would be staying at my grandparents' place while like my parents were, doing like whatever else they needed to do.
Yep.
So really the only time that I had interacting with people, like building friendships, was at school. But because of the lifestyle of my family, there wasn't like the hanging out personal time of getting to interact with individuals on an individual basis outside of school.
Okay.
The only time I got that was with my grandparents. So I ended up building up my grandfather was my grandfather, but he was also my best friend, and he was also my only individual friend. Now, in 4th grade, he died from emphysema. So what I try and like get across to people is that when my grandfather died, it's not just my grandfather died. I lost my grandfather, my best friend, and my only friend all in one fell swoop as an 11-year-old.
Wow.
That destroyed me.
Jeez.
Like when I say rock bottom, like it got in like short. I think that was the year that 9/11 happened. Because I want to say it was April 2001. My grandfather died, and then September obviously comes back around and that hits. And after the 9/11 towers debacle happened, like a month or two later, I think our school had they had a counselor come in, and they're like, anybody like wants to talk about their emotions and stuff like that with regards to the 9/11 Trade Center situation. We have counselors here that are more than happy to talk to you guys. And that like just triggered me as far as like having like an outlet to be able to express and communicate my emotions. I just broke out bawling in front of the middle of the class right there. And they obviously took me out of class for that and then walked me back in. Walking back in and seeing in the eyes of my classmates, like it was a mixture in like, again, obviously they're children. They don't understand what they're doing with their bodies, but like with the body language and the look in people's eyes of like, there was like pity, disgust, because it was like kids do take it as a sign of weakness, pity, disgust, like just like worry, all this, like you want to talk about getting broken down as a kid down to like your bare minimum. Like I didn't want to interact with anybody. So that pushed me into the point of like being extremely antisocial. I went from being like the happy-go-lucky class clown. I was also an artist at the same time.
Wow.
So like I was the class clown. I up until this point, I was getting regularly sent to the principal's office because I was talking while the teacher was talking. Like I was that guy. And I'm sure like people now that like hear me on Spaces, I try to rein myself in because I'll dominate the conversation. I just love talking. I love talking with people. I love communicating. I love exchanging ideas. But so this event kicks off to where I literally flip polar. Like I went from being talkative and happy and nice to don't talk to me. I don't want to interact with any of you. I want to get the fuck out of here.
Wow.
And that stuck around through middle school and up and through like sophomore year of high school, like your most formative years while puberty is kicking in. And it led me to really avoid going to school and everything because I just didn't want to be there. Like people started treating me differently. Like they leveraged up the alienation to the point of like, because it was a mixture of both. Like it'd be the alienation, but then it'd also be me pushing people away. So that obviously made things worse.
Yeah.
And so that obviously also affected my competitive nature. That caused me to want to avoid competition. I no longer wanted to find out that I was weaker than everybody because I already felt like rock bottom, like weak as possible. So I'm like, why am I going to like go compete and confirm this? I already know this. And it wasn't until about sophomore year of high school is when I started working to earn a paycheck. And I started interacting with people outside because like it got to the point of where so like while I was in high school I was playing like this is where I got my like competitiveness outlet. Video games. Video games allowed me to compete in a way that wasn't in a personal kind of I don't have to touch people, I don't have to look people in the eye.
Yes.
And I was really, really good at them. it got to the point of where, like, probably the top game that I was really good at competitively was a game called Rainbow Six Vegas. Rainbow Six Vegas was a tactical shooter of like teams of like I think 5 or 6, and small little maps and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like extremely tactical. Like for people that didn't get to play it, it's like you're playing two sides of a SWAT team, and it was a lot of fun. I was really really good at it, and it was to the point of where I was competing on. So a lot of people probably know of MLG now, like Major League Gaming.
Mhm.
But before it became Major League Gaming, it was a tournament-based system. I think it was called I always screw this up. I don't want to call it, say it was clan battles or battle clans, one of the two. And we were going on these forums and we were establishing our teams, making up our teams on our own, and then we were like orchestrating tournaments and competition and stuff like that. I freaking loved it. I loved it, dude. It was to the point
That's
of
so
where
cool.
I think I was like 16, and these guys were wanting me to go play in pro tournaments down here in Texas. And the one
Wow.
that they specifically invited me to is like, dude, we want you to come play with us, and there's a potential for a $50,000 pot. I was like, I could earn 10 grand as a 16-year-old to play this.
That's
I was like, guys,
wild.
I'm flattered, but as a 16-year-old whose parents hate how much video games he's playing, that this is not going to happen. Like, there's no way this can happen. It would have been interesting if I could have tried, but and I probably should have, because that could have been something interesting. But anyway, so like going through all of this, like, and then so like getting up to the point of like sophomore year, I started partying and stuff to try and like, because like being averse to interacting with your classmates during puberty when everybody's learning sex. I missed so much sex ed because I was just so uncomfortable being there, and I hated everybody around me, that I missed out on a lot of very important information with regards to like not only sex ed, but like I didn't understand sarcasm. Like I was borderline Asperger's or something like that, because like the finer points of just what we would call natural communication,
Mhm.
I missed out on because I didn't want to communicate with anybody. So I resorted to partying. I resorted to partying because it allowed me not only to like inhibit your like to
Yeah.
reduce your
Yes.
inhibitions with alcohol, it allowed me to observe multiple different types of human interaction in one area. Like
Wow.
I could observe how my friends were flirting with girls. I could observe what worked and what didn't. I could also test what worked and what didn't. I could test which way I like to communicate versus other people. I could observe what not to do, which is another great one to
Yeah.
learn, like learn
Yes.
vicariously. I could do all of these things all at one time. And so that started off as a very good, like kind of like test bed and research kind of thing. But then obviously it turned into just me enjoying partying. Like once I got good at it, then I started to employ it. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Like I can gain a lot of social capital by just doing like acting in a certain way as far as partying goes, like being really good at beer pong or something like that.
Yes.
People cared about it back then. And just doing those kinds of things, and then learning what girls and women found attractive. Like that was another thing. That was something I didn't really get. My dad wasn't the greatest at having those kinds of conversations. And again, that's not a dig at my dad. Everybody's dad is going to be different and skilled at different things. What my dad was really, really good at was when I was 17 and up through like 2021, I was working. So he got to the point of being upper echelon of the pipe fitters union. So I got a job being a mechanical helper for the pipe fitters union. And what I learned from my dad was how to operate a team very, very effectively, and how to take care of your team, and how to take care of your guys, and how to look after a team. I learned that from my dad. And then I got to really put it into, effect with the Army. But I didn't learn the aspects of like, oh, here, son, this is how you talk to girls, or this is what girls are looking for, like that kind of stuff. And so like all these different competing effects, like as I learned more and more in like going through high school and everything, learned like the intricacies of communication and all this other stuff. Then I started to get my competitive nature back. So like I went through like this hump of like massive competitiveness, straight down rock bottom for like 10 years, and then I started to climb back up in competitiveness again.
Wow.
And I think that there's a lot of people on both ends of the spectrum that don't understand the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's kind of the cognitive dissonance thing, right? It is hard sometimes to hold those opposing views in your head, or put yourself in other people's shoes and see the other point. It's fascinating. What
Yeah.
a couple I wrote down a couple of different titles of some of the different stuff, which I'd love for you to maybe touch on some of these things that maybe
Okay.
pique your interest. Bitcoin power games, the TTO you did with Opti, or the industrialized farming with the boys and the meat mafia, which is awesome. I love that. Great pod there. Bitcoin is the escape hatch. So some of the three of the bigger ones.
Well, pick one you want to talk about. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So anything that you think maybe is important with any of those, number one, but also kind of leading into the Declaration of Monetary Independence that you have. I don't know. What would you say? The co-founded or co-doing that? I guess with Ulrich.
Co-author.
So who's
I would say co-author.
co-authoring? Yeah. So we talk about any of that stuff, but also I wanted to get into the Declaration, obviously, too.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So the power games we can talk about, it'll branch across everything we've been talking about.
Okay.
So Bitcoin power games, I wrote that specifically because the Bitcoin community is largely, it's a mixture of ignorance, arrogance, and just unawareness or lack of awareness. I don't think unawareness is a word. But people need to understand that everything with regards to as life progresses is all about power. All of it. Whether it's working for better income, like you're gaining more economic financial power in order to get what you want, whether it's working for a bigger title, that is more power. That's like political power. That's authority, which is another form of power. People have this inclination to think that the desire for more power is a negative, and it's not. It's just not. Like, it's like power is similar to a tool. Like, it all depends on the wielder. Like, if I want more power so I can help more people without getting more power, like, I'm sorry guys, but those of you that are listening that disagree with me, if you don't have power, you can't help anybody. It's not possible. It's the reason I wrote a Substack for my for my Substack. I wrote an essay for my Substack a couple of years ago now at this point that I think I released it Christmas Eve of 2021. And I called it the people pleaser paradox. And it gets to the heart of this conversation on power, where there is a dominance that I've noticed, at least in the Midwest. I don't know what it's like on the coast, but in rural Midwest America, where like I consider rural as far as like cities that are of like $150,000 or $150,000 population or less.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed a significant portion of that population talking about being a people pleaser as a positive. I'm going to tell you everybody right now, like I've been adhering to nuance all over this conversation, but there's not going to be nuance what I'm about to say right now. Being a people pleaser is not a positive. It is not a positive, because people pleasers will sacrifice more than they are capable in order to help others. What I'm meaning is that a people pleaser will work themselves to death like a slave. And then a friend of theirs or a family member will express a need, and they will sacrifice where they don't have any more to give. If you're a mother, whether you're a single mom or just a mother, and you're working 8 to 12-hour days, and you feel you haven't been able to be as good of a mother as you think you could be to your child, but your friend, your girlfriend comes around asking for help to do anything, really, anything that is going to take time and effort away from you being a good mother, that is not okay. And that requires the individual to be able to tell that person, it's like, hey, like I recognize that you need help. I cannot afford to help you right now. You're going to have to figure out how to get it done with either somebody else or on your own. And that's a reality that not a lot of people in Western developed worlds are used to. Because, like, I'm sorry, but when push comes to shove, like, if you don't have the capability to help yourself, you cannot afford to strictly rely on the external world or somebody external to your life being able to help you. Because guess what? There is a reality where there won't be somebody who can. And this gets back to the power discussion in the sense of, if you want to be able to effectuate real change and help people in a real, meaningful way, you are behooved to get as much power as you can by whatever means is okay with you. And that's where it allows for people to do very, very bad things, to get greater levels of power, to maybe do bad things. Like, it depends on the individual. There are just some people are just bad people. And that's not a dynamic of like democracy or the American education system or how Europe or China prefers to do things. Some people are just bad people. Some people just don't care. What are you going to do about it? Maybe you should get more power to become a better person to fight those people. That's how you do it. You don't guilt trip a community into not wanting power. That's called communism. Like, you don't want anybody external to you to get better at what they do to gain more power over you. That's socialism, that's communism, that's all that shit.
Yes.
You don't force that, like, you don't force everybody to be limited so that you can feel good about yourself. And then, sorry, I keep coughing. I've had like 6 cups of coffee today, so that's probably why. But there's also an aspect of like the industrialized monocropping with like the Meat Mafia podcast that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this touches on all the other things we talked about as far as like the pendulum swings, the gains in efficiency,
yes,
and all this other stuff, is that people really need to look into Texas Slim and the Meat Mafia and take in what they're talking about, because the natural pendulum of, say, a fertilizer company is to continue to build moats around their economy, in the sense of like actually RFK Jr. talked about this brilliantly with Joe Rogan. He was talking about the use of glyphosate, and glyphosate is basically just like liquid cancer for farming. Not cancer, liquid chemo. It's basically, it just kills everything.
Mm-hmm.
And these industry participants are incentivized to try and genetically engineer a crop where they can just dump glyphosate all over it and it doesn't kill it, but then it kills everything else that's around it.
Yes.
And people don't understand that, like, and this goes back to the hierarchy of authority and power. These companies, these decision makers, are so high up on their horse or on their like their ivory towers that they're not incentivized to think of the individual. They're not incentivized to think of what happens with the glyphosate after you dump it on a crop, works its way into the watershed, and then works its way into the water systems. They're not incentivized to think about how that's impacting you, the single mom or the single parent with a child at home. They're not incentivized to think about what it does to the livestock that are feeding off those grounds and those watersheds and those waterways. They're not incentivized to think about it, because then it affects their bottom. It would be like a drug dealer being concerned about the negative health ramifications of their selling heroin so that they can take care of their own, whatever. Like, they don't care. And that touches on the pharmaceutical company. Like, if they're worried about their bottom dollar and their baseline and making a profit, why would they be concerned about the fact that SSRIs don't solve dick?
Yeah.
They're not, because it keeps you coming back. And it sounds like we're getting into the tinfoil hat like stuff, but like, people need to understand, like, that's a natural incentive mechanism. That doesn't mean that there's some 007 James Bondified Spectre organization.
We're coming full circle now. Yes.
Yeah, that is specifically trying to destroy the world. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yes.
It's just fiat.
Yes.
And people also need to understand that all of this, I've talked about this a few times, all of this shit has already happened. When we talk about the Roman Empire, Bitcoiners like to talk about the Roman Empire from the sense of like the coin clipping and the inflation. But what they don't talk about is that I'm pretty sure I referred to it specifically in the Meat Mafia podcast, in their Substack that I helped write with them, or it was the one with Texas Slim. It might have been both. It might have been just one of them. But I found a quote from a philosopher. I think it was Plato. It might have been Socrates, one of the two greats, or one of the few great philosophers of the time, that observed during the Roman Empire, because they were offering bread and circuses to keep the population complacent, they pushed their farmers to the absolute brink of where they destroyed the soil quality, and the soil turned to sand, to the point of where they couldn't produce any more bread, so they couldn't give it for free to the population and keep them like satiated and calm. All of this has already happened before. We're in the it's not just the US, Europe, Africa, Asia, everybody's been engaging in these monocropping strategies, to the point of where a large portion of the arable land across the globe has been so radically destroyed to the point of where there's zero nutrients within the soil. Guys, if there's no nutrients in the soil, how do you get nutrients into the crop? And if there's no nutrients in the crop, how do you get nutrients into the livestock? And if there's no nutrients in the livestock, how do you get nutrients into your kids? You don't.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Not good answers. Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's another aspect of all this, is like we were taking a lot of these, like when we talk about nutrients or we talk about resources with regards to nutrition, the same resources that are being used to build the cities also contribute as resources to nutrients within our food. Look at all the cities around the world. How much iron and calcium and phosphorus is locked up in our modernized cityscapes that isn't being allowed to recirculate through organic life.
Wild.
Like there's a lot of iron in your body right now. There's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That iron allows for hemoglobin to attract oxygen and deliver it to your body. When you're deficient in iron, you're deficient in like cognition and all sorts of all this other stuff, man. And this is where we can tie it back, and like we can tie it back into the Declaration of Monetary Independence, which is a lot of fun for me to take part in, because it allowed me to. I only contributed like maybe 5 or 6 lines to the list of things that were. I don't want to dox one of the 3 main authors. Like he likes to keep himself very much out of the spotlight, so I like to respect that. He did the majority of the work, and being able to contribute to the Declaration of Monetary Independence and list out the transgressions against society by the weaponization of a fiat currency is something that people need to really wrap their head around. Because if you're working towards because I don't want to say money, because money is different from currency.
Yep. But
money is a currency that is determined by just the free market, by what people want, by what people value. Currency is a money. Well, you can't really use the two to define each other. But a currency is like,
money is a store of value, right?
Yeah.
Currency
in a currency, a currency is a mandated store of value by the state.
Yeah.
If you are slaving away every day to earn a currency that can be debased at the whim of any idiot with white hair that has control over the printer button. If you're doing that and these guys are printing money to protect systems that are engaging in stupidity and greed and fraud, that also means that system is incentivizing those organizations and those individuals to continue to engage in that activity in manners which are obfuscated and protected by smoke screens. Because guess what? And I used to hold this position that life is not a game. I hated hearing it. I'm like, life is not a game. Life is real. It's like, well, I don't hold that position anymore. Life is very much a game. Like you have to game everything in order to get ahead. whether it's competition and if you're in a physical altercation with somebody, you are gaming their capabilities against your own to the point of where you can come out on top. That's the whole point. These guys are no different. When we're talking about, whether we're talking about the NSA or the JP Morgans or the Deutsche Banks or BNY Mellon or Fidelity or BlackRock, they're all playing the game according to the rule set that is established to the point of where they can find outlier leverage or opportunities to beat out everybody else. Humans are designed for this. That whole system is called a problem. We're problem solvers. Their problem is that they want more power, but we have guardrails established to like keep everybody within a certain guise.
Govern.
But if we have the resources and the capability to find a way around those guardrails and to gain leverage over the competition and get more power, more capability, you're a bit of an idiot not to. Like, in all honesty, like you like, and this is where, like, if we were
someone's going to do it.
Yeah, somebody's going to do it.
It's prisoner's dilemma. Like, someone's going to do it.
Yeah.
So
and the difficulty is that like society has gotten away from having a sense of honor, because a sense of honor would prevent people from doing that, right? They're like philosophical, spiritual guardrails.
Yes.
Like, I could do this, but I wouldn't be okay with being the one to do it.
Yes. So true.
That's not a perfect solution, but it reduces the amount of people that are willing to go that route. Now, that also means that it allows the individual or the organization that is willing to do that, they have outsized opportunity, to make serious gains or gain serious leverage in that system. But that's something that you deal with when it comes up. Like, there's no version of reality where you can prevent people from making decisions that you don't agree with, unless you have the power to prevent them from doing it. But you have to have the power. And it goes back to power. Always about power, dude. Always about power games. You have to have the power to not only prevent them from doing it, but also allow people to do things the way that, like, you deem it should be done. And you also have to have the power in the sense of the wisdom to be able to tell when something is okay or not. And like, as far as the Declaration of Monetary Independence goes, like, I was so humbled to be allowed to participate in it, because I remember it was a group chat. It was a group chat in the Bitcoin Magazine Telegram. It's like, hey, I've been working on this it was actually very comparable to the Satoshi Nakamoto thing with the forum.
Wow.
Talking about Bitcoin. It's like, hey, I've been working on this little project. I've got this document here. Would anybody be interested in contributing? And I think within 60 seconds, I was like, yes. So I opened up the document and I started reading through it and seeing what else I could contribute. But yeah, like, so as far as anybody that's listening, if you guys want to check it out, this is a mouthful, but it's spelled exactly as is pronounced. It's Declaration of Monetary Independence.org. Or you can search on Twitter. Too. Yeah, you can search on Twitter. It's at I think the account is Domi_BTC. So DOMI_BTC is, I believe, the Twitter handle that Ulrich made. But if you want to check it out, it's there. You can digitally sign it if you feel so inclined to. But I think probably the most fun that people can get is by attending the Bitcoin conferences, like the big one. So the big one would be the Bitcoin Magazine conference, and then I think we've been working on getting a physical copy at the Pacific Bitcoin conference.
Nice.
And you can show up, and we've been having the physical versions to where people can just sign it. Like, you just sign all over it. It looks like a giant graffiti tag. There's just like signatures everywhere. It's really humbling to see. Like, I think the last one we did had like over 1,000 signatures on it.
Wow.
Yeah, dude, it's cool stuff. I've been talking forever, and I think we touched on like the you did a great job of hitting everything. That I would have forgot like halfway through. Like, what else was there? That is so.
I love that Declaration of Monetary Independence. I think that's gonna grow, I think, as well over time here too. So that's just too cool. I know we're getting towards been ripping for a while and trying not to go Opti style and go for hours at a time.
You can if you want, man.
uh, we'll go for a tad bit more for sure. I got a couple more to. So yeah, I was telling you, writing some kids books, ABCs of Bitcoin, stuff like that. Working with Bitcoin trading cards, everything's education, right? I mean, the things you do is education, right? It's all education. How can we educate people? And in that vein, what do you think? And we touched on it a little bit, but what do you think are some of the more important things for young people, children or parents to teach their children when it comes to whether it's financial intelligence, it could be first principles, natural law, emotional intelligence. What do you think maybe in that realm, and also like money, I guess those two realms, like what do you think just overall in the macro, maybe for kids to learn, the youth to learn, and then conversely also with money, what do you think in terms of that's important for kids to learn?
I think that before there's any conversation about money, I think that there has to be mentorship in the sense of what is morally right, what is morally wrong. That you don't get things out of life by sacrificing nothing. There's always an opportunity cost in everything you do. Because there's a lot of people that I've come across that think that the only opportunity cost is in making a decision like a fork in the road. That there's only one of two. It's like, no, not doing anything is an opportunity cost. Like, because that's something like sometimes the most valuable opportunity cost is honestly not making a decision and just observing. Like, sure, like maybe you didn't buy Bitcoin at 15,000, but maybe because you didn't buy it, you looked into it to understand it more. And sure, maybe you missed out on the 100% like return, but by your increasing your understanding of the asset and the operations of the network, you have a greater understanding of what you just sacrificed your fiat currency value in for the sake of putting it into a vehicle that will protect your purchasing power better than any other vehicle that's available to humanity to date. Like that's a worthwhile like trade-off, because guess what? I've done it, and I think we've all done it in the sense of you buy something you don't necessarily understand its full value and impact. As soon as things get uncomfortable, you're going to get out of it. Yes. And when do you get out of it? The natural human inclination is to get out of it when the pain increases, which means the price is going down. And that goes completely antithetical to how investing works. Like the very natural thing is to want to buy it when it's going up and to sell it when it's going down. But that always means you buy the top and you sell the bottom. And that just means you keep losing. That's why most people can't make it as traders. I tried doing the trading stuff. Like I can do the trading for a little bit amount of time, but then I get emotionally invested and then I screw it all up. I think we all do that. Yep. But back to the parenting stuff is like I think parents need to teach the more esoteric aspects of life. The esoteric in the sense of first principles. Like, you want to understand something, let's dig down to the nuts and bolts. Like, let's understand why it is working the way it is. Like, if you just understanding that your car works by putting in gasoline doesn't really teach you anything. Because like you're not working to understand like all the moving parts that make up the vehicle. You're not understanding like the use of the engine to, spin the wheels, turn the drivetrain, and like affect the transmission and all this other stuff. Like you're not taking the time to understand that gasoline isn't something that's just pulled out of the ground. Like there's a refinement process. There's all this other stuff that goes into making it. And then, because like when you get into that, then you start to also understand, like, for example, one of the bigger problems nowadays with like this whole ESG conversation is that like oil is in everything. So if you're anti-oil, you're anti-modern living, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. But if you're anti-oil, you have to be an idiot, because everything that you are using today was either directly made from oil or was afforded via oil, including those freaking solar panels and wind turbines. All of you idiots are so bullish on building. It just doesn't make sense, dude. But then like on top of doing like the esoteric first principles thinking is also teaching critical thinking.
Yeah.
It's not like parents need to teach kids. It's like, okay, your teacher can tell you one thing, but why is your teacher telling you that? Does your teacher actually know what's happening? Or is your teacher just reading out of a textbook or a PowerPoint? Because I can tell you right now, 95% of the teachers out there don't know dick about shit. They don't.
Yep.
Like they love teaching kids, but the majority of them don't understand the actual intricate operations of a lot of the stuff they're teaching.
Yep.
Like, you can understand, like a teacher can teach kids that, okay, you're going to eat some food. Your mouth is going to chew up the food into a bolus. The bolus is going to go down to your esophagus. It's going to go down to your stomach, where it's going to be broken down a little bit more. And then the absorption occurs in the intestines. Most teachers fail right there. Most teachers are out there telling kids that like the stomach is absorbing food. It's not. That's wrong. You're an idiot. The absorption is occurring in the intestines. That right there is just a problem in its own right. But then there's also the intricacies of how many of these teachers know that, like, in order to absorb food within the body, it has to be at body temperature first. So when you're eating cold ice cream or you're drinking ice cold water, it is taking excessive amounts of time to get used by the body, because the body has to warm it up first before it can use it. And the reason for that is that, like, it has to do with the cell membrane permeability. Like, if it's too cold, it's not going to cross.
Wow.
Like, it's that simple.
It's incredible.
So, like, and that also means that we need better teachers, in the sense of we probably need teachers outside of the American education system, because a lot of these teachers are so both entitled and insecure. You see the videos on social media. They've been propagating it for as long as social media has been around. Like, I'm sure you remember the video of the kind of inner city kid that had the long blonde hair, and he just snaps on his teacher for not being a quality teacher, in the sense of, you're not inspiring these kids to learn.
Yes.
You're just echoing a bunch of nonsense that you don't even believe or understand. Like, so that means that we also need teachers that are well equipped and willing to engage with students that provide pushback. Because a kid that provides pushback for the last 20, 30 years has been, like, viewed as some sort of, like, detriment to the classroom.
Detriment.
Like a rebel.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Nuisance.
Like, if a kid is pushing back, he's trying to understand. And if you react in a way where the fact that the kid is pushing back makes him a bad kid, he's going to get angry at the world. Like, you can't do that. Like,
can't put everyone in the same bucket. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And everybody tries to understand in different ways. Some kids will provide, like, how many people have you and I interacted with regards to Bitcoin? They get emotionally charged when they don't understand something.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's like, and that's
time.
where, like, and that's another thing that parents need to teach their kids is the EQ. So there's an aspect with regards to society right now with, like, the dating world, where there is a propensity for, and this is not sexist, but there's just a stereotype that women like to talk about emotional intelligence. And they're conflating with the expression of emotion with having emotional intelligence. Not the same thing.
Yeah.
Not the same thing. Just because you're emotional doesn't mean you understand your own emotions or how to control them. Emotional intelligence involves controlling your emotions. And if we had more parents that were teaching their children EQ, emotional intelligence, in the sense of understanding where the emotion is coming from as far as insecurities and things, to the point of where we could have individuals in society that are engaging in communication and being able to separate the emotion from their insecurity and the situation. if you do that, then you can have really, really awesome constructive conversations like you and I have been able to be a part of. Like that one in Simply Bitcoin, what was it, last Friday? The individual the individual was getting very, very worked up and mad that we kept saying the same things, but like we kept saying the same things to him, but he wasn't understanding that the words that he was choosing in his conversation were completely antithetical and competitive. It's like, no, like we understand the position that you're pushing. You don't understand that the words that you're saying are not they're not meshing.
They're not coming out that way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so like that particular engagement was a great example of how people that don't have emotional intelligence and also don't have the vocabularical, I don't even know if that's a word, vocabularical understanding of what it is that they're saying. Like that creates so much friction in societal like communication that like you have to, it's the Brandolini effect. You have to expend 10 times more effort to explain to them that what they're saying doesn't make sense because they don't understand it. So you have to go through, you have to go all the way back to square one. It's like, no, this means this means this. You're saying it in this manner, which means this, which is this outcome.
Yes.
So so like when it comes to parenting, man, it's obviously parenting is a difficult thing. But like doing like parents investing in like the foundational aspects of human communication, as far as like being able to teach their children nuance, being able to teach their children critical thinking, being able to teach their children emotional intelligence. Because guess what? Like, I get it. Like your parents, like you want to be able to do other things, but like, I'm sorry, but when you bring a life into reality, I don't care that you want to go get drunk with your friends. That's not your job anymore. It's really not. And there's so many parents that are dropping their kids off so they can go get shit-faced with all their idiot friends. I don't care. I don't care. Like, you are responsible for a living thing. It's not a puppy. Like you have an adult child that is your own making. You have to put in the effort to make sure that they become an effective member of society. Because this is another thing that Andrew Tate has talked about. Like all these, like the parents of all these people that are like, they're committing egregious acts like mass shootings. None of these parents are taking responsibility for it.
So true.
Like you understand how crappy I would feel if I raised a human being to the point of where they are so broken that they're going out and committing these acts? Because guess what? It's not as reflective on the American education system as much as it is a failure of your own parenting upon the American society.
Yep.
Like the parents are the problem.
Yes.
I say all this stuff like not being a parent. You're not a parent, like you don't understand. And this is something that I've also I get worked up on just having these discussions with people. When I'm talking about all these things that parents need to be capable of doing, it's like, well, you're a parent. You're not a parent. You don't understand. It's like, that's a load of bullshit. And
it is. Yep.
And like, I've been in plenty of leadership positions. I know how to develop personnel. I know how to lead personnel, and I know how to teach people. It's like, that is parenting.
Yep.
Like, just because you decided to have sexual intercourse with some other idiot that was willing to sleep with you and it turned into a living thing does not endow you with some unnatural level of intelligence or wisdom.
Yep.
Just because you bumped ugly with somebody does not make you better than me.
Yep.
I don't care about your opinion.
There's a lot of coaches on all kinds of sports teams that are great coaches, win championships, who have some of them never played at that level or even close to that level, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same dynamic. You can tell them not going to be a coach, or something to that effect. I mean, in general, that can be said in a way, but it's not some absolute. Like people, that's where I think, again, holding the opposing opinions in your head at the same time is so important, because we have to take people's perspective that are parents and not parents, because you're outside as an objective observer. You're saying, hey, like, what's going on here, right? And I think that has to be done through all walks of society.
Yeah, I would agree. Absolutely agree.
Absolutely. Taking this back a little bit in a way, because we didn't really touch on, we touched on your story, obviously, like your mentors, a little bit, your grandfather, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
what was your introduction to money, and what was your introduction to Bitcoin? Like, yeah, they're kind of separate questions in a way. But what was that like for you as a kid growing up, and then getting into, your teens, obviously, and then where you are now? Like, what was that introduction to Bitcoin and to money?
Well, it was ultimately it was about as basic as you can get. Like it got to the point of I don't know what age I was. I think going through like the really kind of catastrophic depressive state. Like I don't have a whole lot
Hmm.
of memories of my childhood. Um, but I think what it really was is I just hit the like whatever age it was, my parents were like, okay, you want something, you're gonna have to earn it. Like you have to work for it. You're gonna have to go mow your neighbor's lawn for $20 if you want to buy
Hmm.
something.
Yep.
And obviously that got leveraged up more when it came to the point that I was middle class family, but I was privileged with great parents in the sense of it got to the point where I was 16, I could drive, and my dad he had a vehicle that was for work, and he just complained of like it was a Malibu, and
Hmm.
he was a blue collar worker. He's like I getting in and out of this thing is a pain in like the literal ass. So like
Hmm.
I'll loan the car to you. You can use it. Go get a job, like work at a grocery store, like a bagger and a cart kid. So that was my first time. That was my first job. Um, my parents were very much about that. It's like you want something, you have to work for it. We're not just gonna like we're not you're not a child anymore. You're not just
Hmm.
gonna get it for free. And even then, like when I was a kid, I remember my sister and I wanting like Pokemon cards. Not every time you want something, you're gonna get it. Like my parents were very adamant
And
about
that's
that. Like,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
right.
like you can throw a fit all you want, but you're like it's not gonna help you
Yep.
get it any faster. And then so that was my introduction to money. um my introduction to Bitcoin was a little bit more extreme in the sense of I didn't come across so like the very first time I came across Bitcoin, I had heard about it. um I think I had heard about it in like community college because I didn't graduate until Bitcoin had already been made. um in community college, I'd heard about gamers that were playing RuneScape, and they were power leveling accounts on RuneScape and World of Warcraft, and they were exchanging it for Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, I don't know what Bitcoin is. It sounds like some sort of digital, currency, whatever. That sounds interesting. Didn't pay attention to it for basically 9 years, and as I was getting ready to mobilize for deployment overseas, I was like, okay, this is gonna be my first time actually having a salary, like not being an hour for hour wage.
Hmm.
And it was going to be in an environment where it's tax free. So I'm going to get a good portion of pay. I don't want to just burn it all away like every other idiot story I've heard about in the army.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, I need to look into investment strategy and stuff like that. And as I'm like mentally preparing for like 6 months out from the point of leaving, I heard about Bitcoin again. It was spring of 17. It just broke $1,000 or something like that. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Again, ignored it. And then 3 months later in August, or maybe 4 or 5 months later in August of that year, it had quadrupled to 4,000. I'm like, it. I was like, I turned to my mom. I'm like, this thing quadrupled in 5 months. A lot of people want it for whatever reason. Like, I think I need to look into this. And my mom was like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is, but you probably should. And then going through the mobilization process in Fort Hood, which for those that weren't in the army, Fort Hood is an absolute shithole. Like,
Really?
oh, dude.
That's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
well, and I got a biased experience because like on Fort Hood, the National Guard units they place them in former POW camps, like the World War II
Really?
POW camps. Like they have the National Guard units stay up there, just
Wow.
like black mold and asbestos ridden, and like this, the barracks are like just pure concrete cinder blocks that like you can't get any cell signal in and out of. Like it was bad, but I found this little kind of like niche at my bunk where if I held my phone in this very particular way, I could get enough cell signals where I could scroll the internet and learn about Bitcoin.
No
And that
way.
was when Coinbase started up too. So I started
That's
buying like
right.
little bits every like little bit I could. And then of course, like I'm an idiot, like any other retail person getting into Bitcoin. So I'm thinking I can trade on Coinbase, which like with their GUI, they're taking like however many percentages every time.
Yep.
So I was just losing money. And but it was all learning. I was still learning like the entire time. And then so that solidified Bitcoin, but then the entire rest of the deployment, I was known as the Bitcoin guy in my unit.
Oh, that's too funny.
Especially getting into November in Kuwait, where it's like you're approaching like 100 degrees or something like that. Well, maybe not. Like Kuwait in November is still in the northern hemisphere, so it would have been hot, like 80s, 90s, but it wasn't that bad.
Jeez.
But I'm sitting there with my guys in the desert, and we're doing all sorts of shit with the equipment. I'm just looking at my phone. I'm like, guys, it just broke $20,000. Like, what the fuck is happening? Well, I guess that was December. Anyway, I'm like, Jesus, dude. Every time I check the phone, it's going up in price. And so, like, all the guys in my unit are just like turn around. They're like, dude, shut up. We got work to do. Stop looking at your phone. So, but
that's amazing.
That was, yeah. And then, like, I just never stopped.
Yeah. It's kind of went from there. What did you like? So, what did you study even before that? Was that kind of just your foray into like even just macro, even geopolitical stuff? Was that really kind of the genesis of all of it? Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Because like through Bitcoin, you get to understand game theory and incentives a lot better. Mm-hmm. And then you start to look into, well, okay, why don't countries like it? Well, countries don't like it because they can't control it. And they can't control it because of this. And it's like, okay, well, if they can't control it because of this, then like, what else are they doing? And then you start to look into incentives as far as like Bitcoin mining and energy production. Then you like, if you're going to look into that, you have to look into oil and gas because there's no other, you don't get energy production without oil and gas. And then that also ties into oil and gas, also ties into livestock and farming and ranching and all that shit. So like Bitcoin was like that
the gateway drug.
It was a 0 to 1 moment where it's like, okay, Bitcoin, and then all these other spider webs of things that like it pulls back the veil on a lot of things.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I've never thought of it like a gateway drug, but it truly is because it's so simplistic. Bitcoin is actually, people talk about you got to spend hundreds of hours to understand Bitcoin truly. But I think what people are truly meaning is you're actually trying to understand the fiat system and how Bitcoin fixes those things. And I think that's where like the study comes in because Bitcoin itself is actually simplistic and it is the gateway into, wow, I can now see very easily how all these systems are so interconnected and why things are so messed up. And I think that's where,
it operates as a money as like the majority of us thought money was operating or currency was operating as. We're like, oh, like it works like this. Like, no, that's not how it works. Like you look into how the Federal Reserve operates. Like look at the George Gammon video where he does the dry erase board where he breaks down the operations of the Federal Reserve. It's a fucking joke.
Unreal.
Apologize for the language. I don't know if you're trying to get
it's good.
But it's just like
good.
you get these visual representations of how these institutions operate. And don't get me wrong, like I've written about complex adaptive systems and like how like the body is very much comparable to an economy and all these competing systems are working to maintain homogeneity. I understand the value of a complex system, but when you look at the Federal Reserve and how they produce a fiat currency that is literally made from nothing, you start to wonder why. Like you start to just wonder, it's like, why do we trust in this? Why should I value this thing that is mandated by the government that I use to exchange value? Yet when a bank screws up and causes a global financial crisis that was threatening to bring down the entire global economy, and they decide, instead of reprimanding them, they decide to give them a handout, basically incentivizing that further behavior. Because when a kid does something bad and you give him a piece of candy for it, what's the kid gonna do?
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, you put it that way.
So like and that really that's what sparked a lot of my wanting to look at all these other systems under a magnifying glass. And I started doing a lot of that through Bitcoin Magazine. Like a lot of the articles I wrote for Bitcoin Magazine,
that's right,
looking into the American education system, looking into the farming, like looking into the political system. Like I'm like, this is all just a joke. And that sounds super dark for anybody that's in America. Like to hear that everything is a joke. But when you look at how they operate, and then you look at the outcomes that we've been getting, like look at the political landscape. Look at how many politicians have we listened to rant about the problems that they're going to solve? They get into office and they do shit about it. How many times do we have to like engage in that before we like? Have you looked up the definition for insanity? Like at this point, we have 90% of the American population actively engaging in insanity on a day-to-day basis.
Yep.
So it's like, and before Bitcoin, I understand why like none of these problems got solved, because when you're looking at these systems from within the systems, and you can't see a way to fix the system within the system, then you're just kind of like, okay, well, I'm just going to do the best that I can from within.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't until that you see, it is very much like the Matrix. It's like getting pulled out, allowing yourself to get pulled out of the system and see the boundaries outside of it. It's like there is like a whole other world of possibility that is out here that we have been withheld from being able to see. Because and that it sounds very esoteric, but a great example would be the American education system and history and textbooks. I don't think I read a single bit of literature in all of my years of schooling about how the Ford manufacturing company was building engines for the Nazis' trucks. That would have been a pretty interesting piece of information.
Something we might need to know.
Yeah. Or the fact that I think it was Operation Market Garden. The fact that while that was happening, there was a massive oil pipeline that was connected from Canada to the UK. Like, because it wasn't necessarily that the American Marine went over there and won the war. It wasn't just that. It's also the American oil that was being piped via that pipeline to the UK and Europe so they could, continue powering tanks and everything. So like this kind of like frou-frou view of American exceptionalism starts to get tainted, or not tainted, but diminished. Because I'm very much about American exceptionalism. I think that our version of freedom can bring a lot more to the world as far as a positive than the rest of the world can. Because like one thing that people when we talk about all this stuff too, like with regards to politics and economics, it's all an experiment. People look at economics as if it's a science. Economics is a science, but people need to understand that science is art. Like science is taking one thing, controlling for the variables, and figuring out how something operates. That's science. It's a lifestyle. It's not like something you do. It's something that you are.
Yeah.
And economics is not a science. Most of it is just like, hey, I have an idea of how it could work. Let's play it out. Keynesianism, the Keynes version of economics, has been an experiment. Just like America as a country has been an experiment. Nobody knew it was going to work out the way it did. We don't know how it's going to work out going into the future. But people can't, and I think this goes back to the lack of parenting for the last couple of decades. People can't wrestle with the fact that the future isn't certain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if the future was certain, then why are we here? Like, what's the point?
Right.
And when it comes to economics, people need to understand that like there's no guarantee that the value that you put in your bank account or in the US dollar is going to be there tomorrow. Like there's a serious level of ignorance, and I think maybe I'll just leave it at ignorance. There's a serious level of ignorance when it comes to my friends that are bankers, my friends that are economists, that aren't necessarily, they very much disagree with my position on Bitcoin. And there's a level of ignorance to them when you bring up the US dollar and the American economy. It's like, well, It's the US dollar. It's the global reserve currency. It's not going away tomorrow. It's like, okay, well, while I can agree with that, like that particular point of view, I will agree it's a very low probability that the US dollar system is going to collapse in a 12-hour period.
Right.
But if the world decides it doesn't want US dollars anymore, then they don't want US dollars anymore. That's all that it is.
Yep.
That's all that matters. And when people push back on me, they're like, well, it's not going to collapse tomorrow. I'm like, okay, it might not collapse for our tomorrow, but on a historical standpoint, it very much could. Because people will harken it back to the Roman Empire. It's like, well, the Roman Empire didn't like get destroyed in one day. It's like, okay, no, you're correct, but you have to look at how quick their communications were back then. How long did it take for the Roman legions to find out that their currency was worth shit? It would take a while.
Yeah,
it would take quite a while for that information to get back to them, and then it would also take a while for Rome itself to find out that their legions weren't listening to them anymore. How long does it take for you to communicate an idea to somebody today? How long did it take for what was it, $24 billion to be siphoned out of SVB?
Yeah.
It took about 12 hours.
Yeah. I was gonna say minutes, hours. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so you look at the things that are happening across the world today with like the BRICS. The BRICS is like, in this conversation, the BRICS is as much an experiment as the US dollar and the American experiment. It's all experiments. We're just all wandering in the dark trying to figure out which way works best. But when you see what America has done with the US dollar, and you see what America has done with a certain inoculation that rhymes with Blovid by a company that rhymes with Stizer, and you see what they have done to not only Americans, but people across the world broader, and you look at what people who represent America, like Bill Gates, has been doing with inoculations in Africa that have not been succeeding at all. And you start to consider how much people don't like the way America is doing things. You have to think about things from a very painfully real position. And the fact that because we are operating in reality, nothing is forever. And that means that the world is going to be changing in a dramatic series of ways that people in general just they're not comfortable with even humoring that thought right now. It's a fascinating thing when a population becomes so complacent, so averse to change, even though change is the only real law of nature. Like nothing is static in nature. Even those molecules in your ice cubes in the freezer, they're still moving. They're still changing. They're just changing slowlier than you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's going to be a series of really, really painful lessons that people are going to learn. A lot of people are already learning in like Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon, Turkey, that I think also means that those individuals stand to gain much, much more as a percentage of their livelihood. I think those individuals that are learning those lessons now are in a much better position than Americans are right now. Now, people will conflate that. We're like, well, you think that people in Argentina that are only earning like a couple dollars a day are going to be able to benefit better than the US? Not on a dollar per dollar basis, no. But as far as a lifestyle and a livelihood and a sense of ease and peace of mind, absolutely. Because guess what? They're already busting their ass and working hard, and they're saving a little bit of Bitcoin where they can. You don't know how to bust your ass. You don't know how to work hard. You're fat. You're lazy. You can't challenge. You can't accept the fact that the world is going to be different tomorrow, and that maybe your Netflix won't be there.
So true.
Like it's just, I could rant about this stuff all day because it's pathetic, man. Like it really is. It's really, really sad.
Too comfortable, right? Just too comfortable. It's
Yeah.
it's a disease,
Like
right?
you know how many people over the last, because like I've been on a serious life transformation for the last like 7, 8, 9 years. You know how many people I left behind from the partying world that they have legitimate panic attacks when they aren't drinking on the weekend because they don't
Jeez.
know how to occupy their time.
Wow.
They are so lost. They don't know how to occupy their free time without consuming some form of drug.
Wow.
You know how
That is scary.
like that is truly terrifying. They're
That
like, well,
is.
what do I do with my time? I'm like, I don't know. Go on fucking YouTube and learn how to play guitar or get into woodworking. Like, start carving some
Yes.
shit with a knife. Like, be like those guys in
Develop
the
a
movies that are
skill.
around. Yeah, develop a skill.
Yep.
Read a book. That'd be a good place to start. Like,
It's unbelievable. So,
yeah.
speaking of books and stuff, who are so over this transformation over the last handful of years, what are your big resources we're using to stay up to date, kind of books you're reading right now or have read, and like mentors, people you kind of looked up to over the last handful of years to kind of get you to where you are now?
Biggest book, as far as like the macro stuff for the operations of America, would be Tailspin by Stephen Brill. You
Great
guys
book.
think that
Yeah.
some of these conversations around like reading, like Jeff Booth's book was another great one, but Jeff Booth's book pales in comparison to what Stephen Brill talks about in Tailspin. The dude was a lawyer, and he provides all the receipts for all the documentation and statistics that he refers to. One of the biggest one he talks about in that book, it's not very well organized for like bringing up these points of conversation because he approaches it from probably more of a way that like how we've been talking about things, like a flowing conversation of where like multiple different
Okay.
things from like American education and the health system will tie in like across the board.
Yep.
But there was one that really scared the shit. Well, two that scared the shit out of me. One, he talks about the American education system and the incentive mechanism within it, to where there's basically three different American education systems. There's like the metro, right? The metro urban, which is where basically all of like the problem children of like an urban city go to, like very low quality education. Then there's the average middle class public school system, and then there's the ivory towers upper class education system that are like designed where like if you're not from this family or of this dollar value, then you can't be here. And he talks about how like the ivory system built its own moats, and it would produce particularly individuals that were like lawyers, like the Ivy League schools. They started producing an out of balance portion of like administrators and lawyers, because that's where all the dollar value was, right?
Yeah.
Dollars, like lawyers just rake in the dollars, is disgusting. And then he showed a graph of the number of administrators in hospital systems, and it is just up and to the right. Like it looks like a Bitcoin chart. It's exponential.
I think those charts are in the W2F happened in 1971. You know, that site. I know those hospital administrators, you know, lawyers, everything. Right?
Oh, is it on there? It might be on there. So like,
it is. I think they might use his charts, maybe. Yeah.
And so like you see that chart, and then he brings up the healthcare system and how health insurance, I think, I can't remember what decade section it was. It was like something like the 90s to the 2000s, or like the 2000s to the 2020s. It was like a multi-decade time scale. He talks about how the healthcare cost has risen by 700% in that. And he's like, why would this be? Because the hospitals are getting weighed down with liabilities and costs because they're hiring on so many administrators. And then you get to talk about how like the hospitals are privately run in order to try and like, you know, turn a profit in the sense of like to maintain operations. Then you get to talk about how the sales representatives are working their way into steering how hospitals are run and the avoidance of malpractice lawsuits and all that stuff, which feeds back into the lawyers. So Tailspin was a really good book.
Was that the book that 'cause I believe he wrote like a Time magazine article that was like how my generation broke America, and about like Ivy Leagues and how they
he refers to that article in the book.
Okay, I was gonna say
I think Tailspin came out in 2017. I
okay.
think.
I remember Kiyosaki, talking about that article that he had written, and I can't remember what time, if that was before or after or what it was. It was how like the Obama and the Clintons, all these, they were just like, oh, we're gonna start taking people from the South and move them to Ivy Leagues and like creating like these people, like creating this character basically. Like we're just gonna start taking people from around the country that have different
leaders.
Yeah, manufacturing leaders and stuff. Yes.
Yep.
Incredible.
So Stephen Brill was a great resource in that, and then that book was actually how I started structuring a lot of the things I wanted to write about. Just because of the way that he structured the arguments, I was like, okay, this is really cool stuff. Like, because like the way, like when I was reading it, I'm like, this is terrifying. Another great book. I'm gonna mix up a lot of the books that I read then and the ones that I've since read. But 48 Laws of Power is a really great one by Robert Greene. I think one thing that people get incorrect about that book is it's not a roadmap for accumulating power. It is a topographical map of showing the different ways of acquiring power. So I think people read it incorrectly, thinking that you're supposed to like there are 48 laws of power in the sense of like you're supposed to engage in all of them. It's like, no, if you read the book, a lot of them are competing against each other.
Yeah.
48 Laws of Power is good. Jeff Booth, Price of Tomorrow is obviously very good. Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel is very good. That's a good basic kind of elaboration on just incentives. Fed Up by Danielle DiMartino Booth. That was another terrifying book because she exposed a lot of the stupidity from within the Federal Reserve. It's like they tout themselves as having hundreds of PhDs, but then none of them understand that what they're doing is like doesn't make sense, or the fact that they're manipulating statistics to confirm their bias. What would be another one? Starfish and the Spider. Starfish and the Spider was really good. It sounds weird, but it talks about how decentralized systems are so effective.
Interesting.
They talked about
Wow.
I got recommended that one. I think it was Mitch Klee, who works for Foreman Mining now. I'm pretty sure he was the one that turned me on to that. And then another really good one was obviously Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Specifically the newest one, the one with the new part 2,
the new version.
Because he in the original, he kind of he alludes to the jackals, which would be like, for those that haven't read it, he calls people jackals, people that are like Jason Bournes, like the private military contractors that do the dirty work. He actually had an interaction with not only interviewing and talking with a jackal, but he actually got poisoned. Like, really? Poisoned in the sense of he went to the emergency room and a doctor was like, dude, you don't come into contact with this compound without somebody wanting you to die. Especially in the potency that he received it. Like, he was hemorrhaging on the inside.
Wow.
Yeah. Really bad stuff. What other books?
Man.
I will say one that's going to be a little controversial. The Rational Male by Rollo Tomasi. Now, I say that with caution because I tried rereading it the other day and I can't. But I read it at a very formative time in my young male adulthood, to where the book comes off very pickup artisty. It's gross. Like it is gross. But there are kernels of very informative information in there where he talks about just like where he's psychoanalyzing the male mind.
Interesting.
And
wow.
And looking at because one of my favorite, probably my favorite part of the whole book is he's talking about the comparison between what an alpha male really is and what an insecure male tries to project as alpha. And that's something that I don't think a lot of young men and women can parse out. Like a true alpha male is just going to do what he wants without regard of what other people think. That can result in negatives and positives. It doesn't matter. You can be an alpha male and be a piece of shit person. You can also be an alpha male and be a really great person. And he talks about how a lot of these guys that are growing up, they'll be so insecure that they'll think that they have to be cocky and disruptive and loud and audacious, and that I'm a masculine male. Let me beat my chest and like tell the world. It's like, no, because guess what? Like, those guys will try and position themselves as being like the king.
Yes.
And then when the problems actually arise, those guys tend to collapse and under the pressure and fold. Whereas the king will like you can beat your chest all you want. The true king's going to come around. He's going to solve the problem. He's going to smack the guy that was beating his chest about it and tell him to get back down in the dirt. That's where he belongs. And then the king's going to be like, okay, problem solved. I'm going to go back doing my own thing. You know?
Yes.
So that was a really good book.
Makes me think of the Thomas Paine, Are You a Winter Soldier or a Summer Patriot, and just kind of
I haven't read that one.
It's not, I'm trying to think, I don't know if it was in Common Sense or what pamphlet or book he had written or where he mentioned it, but yeah, like those terms, I love that. Like, are you here for just the Summer Patriot? Like, oh, we're winning the Revolutionary War, great, I'm in, like,
oh, it's winter here, I'm gonna go hide in my home
right. Now. Are you deserting when it's time to get
tough? Actually, you mentioning Thomas Paine, another great book would be The Law by Frederick Bastiat. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
There's a book by Nikola Tesla where he's talking about I can't remember the title. It's like The Problem with Energy in the Human Condition or something like that. It's a short book, but it's really, really dense. And he's talking about some of the issues with regards to generating energy and stuff like that. And like he gets into some of the interesting ESG topics that were way ahead of his time.
Jeez.
But yeah, that was a pretty cool book. I have plenty others on my bookshelf that I just can't think of right now.
Yeah. Do you know, I know Ford always was attributed the energy money thing. Is that from Tesla as well, or is that Ford? It had to have been. It didn't have to be Ford. It must have been.
I'm pretty sure it was Ford.
It was in the newspapers,
Tesla,
but
he does get to the point of talking about it, like in
that's
concept.
what I thought. I swear he's maybe talked about it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Ford did, like he
a more commercialized one. Yeah.
And to be honest too, trying to pin down where these quotes come from is honestly tough. It's tough, and a lot of it really doesn't matter that much because
right.
Just within the Bitcoin community or even America, it doesn't really matter. But how many times have you had this epiphany that was original in your mind? Like somebody didn't put it there. It's not like Inception. It's not like somebody gave you the seeds of a thought and it bloomed. You just had an epiphany in the shower or whatever you were doing. You're like, oh, damn. What about this? And then you hear somebody that you have never interacted with before in your life say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, with regards to events and incentives of the time and the day, many different people can come to the same conclusion from different walks of life. And I think, because I've fallen into that trap plenty of times, of things like, no, that was my thought. That was my original thought. You're taking credit for it. It's like, well, that's not how reality works, There's no such thing as intellectual property in the real world. But yeah, I think that's a decent list of books.
Yeah, that's a really good list. Man, this has been so good, dude. I know it's we've been about 2 hours now.
Damn.
I know.
That
wait,
flew
is it
by.
an hour? I'm like trying to do the math. It's like it's been an hour. I'm like, whoa, no, okay, it's been in kind of wrapping here, any last thoughts by you, but also I wanted to talk, just quickly about any projects you're working on, kind of what's got you motivated, fired up right now, whether it's the spaces you guys got going on, which I love, you and the boys doing the military spaces Wednesday nights, any articles you're working on, what's got you fired up right now?
So I am jacked up about doing the Bitcoin Veterans podcast on Wednesdays. For those of you that do listen to this, we're doing a podcast where we're recording and we're engaging in spaces live at the same time. Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern. That'd be 8 Central and 7 Pacific, I believe. I might be off on the Pacific one.
Sorry,
Pacific
6 Pacific,
6
9,
Pacific.
yeah,
Yes,
7,
Pacific.
8 Mountain Time, or
you guys on the
7
West
Mountain Time.
Coast always screw me up.
I know.
So like 6 Pacific.
Yep.
8
7
Central.
Mountain, 8 Central. Yep.
Yep.
9 Eastern. Yep.
So yeah, like on Wednesday evenings, you can find us on Twitter Spaces or on YouTube or Spotify the day after. We're gonna be chatting about some of the overlap between Bitcoin and why it's a good place for military veterans to go. But my main focus isn't necessary. I think, like I said in the first episode, I think the whole Bitcoin conversation is an augmentation. But my main focus is talking about the broader societal issues. Specifically like with obviously my health background, talking about working out and physical fitness and psychological and cognitive and emotional fitness and stuff like that. But also with regards to like masculine role models and masculine leadership, because I think we're lacking all of it. Because it's not just men that men look up to. Women look up to men.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that in a misogynistic way. I'm saying that in the sense of, how can we expect women to know how to find a quality man when they don't know what a quality man is, because there hasn't been quality men in their life for them to interact with and understand. So yeah, I think that's going to be a great, interesting chapter of my life. I don't like, it's already been extremely rewarding in the sense of like what people have come forward and talked to us about as far as like why they're glad that we're doing it. And then as far as projects goes, I've taken kind of like a break with writing because I was writing quite a bit there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I have one article that I wrote through that I published primarily through Simply, but I'm going to be releasing it on my Substack here in a couple days. And if you want to read it for Simply, the title of it is called Writing This Cacophony of Wrongs. And I talk about how a lot of the stuff we talked about here today, actually, with regards to American society and why, and the fact that like nobody is critically thinking, nobody is like looking at like the game board with a sober take. And that if we are really trying to right the Titanic before it strikes the iceberg, like we have to start now. And we have to start in the sense of like what we were talking about earlier with like the parenting. Parenting is going to be the main rudder. And because when you're steering a society, you're not steering a rowboat. You are literally steering the Titanic. It takes a lot of effort in order to make even marginal changes. And then like going back to what we were talking about, if you want to see the results and the dividends of that effort, it's going to take a long time to see it.
Yes.
Which means just like getting down to the nitty gritty and grinding it out for a long time. So I'm going to be publishing that on the 30th. And other than that, like most of my projects are really just getting back to, because like, as you know, and like the people that are listening probably don't know, is I recently moved to Houston. And those of you that haven't moved in a long time or never have to move, it's a very expensive feat. And I want to get back to the point of getting my capital cushion and my Bitcoin stack up back to where I'm comfortable. So I'm probably going to be between like getting some work done and then personal training individuals, and then also working on my own projects. I'm probably going to be taking a break from Spaces conversations for a while, aside from like the Bitcoin veterans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which, if I'm being completely honest, I need to stay off Twitter anyway. Twitter is like its own drug in its own right.
Seriously.
But yeah. So like I would like to. I really want to be able to sit down and put together a book, or maybe a couple books between all the things that I've talked about. Because I don't
awesome.
Like a lot of people in the Bitcoin community, they want me to do like a Bitcoin book, but I don't want to, like, the things I like to talk about aren't just for Bitcoiners.
Yes.
You know, and I don't want to, I don't want to miss out on spreading what I think is the right message because of the fact that it's tied to Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of the Bitcoin community also falls short, is they like, I've ranted with you and Opti about this many, many times. It's like, not every conversation needs to be an attempt to orange pill somebody. Not every conversation is it right to attempt to orange pill somebody. And this is one of the reasons why so much of the external world, because we only make up maybe 0.01% of the people on the planet. Not everybody wants to hear about Bitcoin, and that's fine. They're not obligated to. But there are a lot of other aspects that many of us in this community that we call home, with regards to first principles thinking and foundational understanding and critical thinking. These are aspects that the entire world needs. Let the orange pilling and the Bitcoin take a backseat for a while. Get people back to thinking how they need to be thinking to be efficacious members of the global society, because it is a global society now.
Yes.
There's no going back from deglobalization. It can consolidate, which is what it's doing right now. It's going to consolidate. It's going to restructure. It's going to do all this. But we are not going back to feudal world operations. If it starts going that way, we have lost the plot, and
we have way bigger problems.
Yeah, we have way bigger problems to worry about.
Yes.
So if we actually do want to leave the world in a better place than when we found it, which I very much adopt that philosophy, I think that's the mark of true masculinity and true manhood. I think that if you're engaging in your community and your world in a way where you are not providing value and you're not improving the world broader to the point of where the children that are being brought into this world have a leg up on us, then you are part of the problem. If you are, and I talked about my video gaming with you, if you are sitting at home and you are not learning skills and you are not doing things to help improve the betterment of other people's lives, you are the problem. It goes back, and I keep saying things to keep this conversation going, but it goes back to the whole philosophy of, and it sounds super cliche and super cringy, but if you have to be the change in the world you want to see. If you want to see better men in the world, you need to be a better man. And ladies, if you want to see better women in the world, guess what? You got to be a better woman. There's no other way around it. There's literally no other way around it. You don't get to complain about how there aren't any good men in society or good women in society if you're going around being some sort of tramp or a slut. I'm sorry, but you don't. You're not living by the philosophy you expect to see in others.
Yes. You attract what you are, right? Yeah. I mean, that's
and that's a whole other esoteric conversation you can have with regards
to it is for next time. Time, right?
Yeah.
A whole nother rabbit hole.
But I think that most people that are a part of this Bitcoin thing, I think that the majority of them would have better, more fulfilling lives if they stopped treating every human interaction as an opportunity to get them to convince them, because most of it is convincing or persuading, to persuade an individual to see the world through their lens. It's that doesn't matter. Why do these people have to see the world the way you do? They don't have to. Let's teach them how to be better people. Maybe the Bitcoin stuff can come downstream from that.
Incredible stuff, man. Boy, oh boy. So much we talked about, with so much more to talk about in the future.
Oh yeah, dude.
My goodness.
We're the best part is we can even talk about conspiracies, man. And I love conspiracies.
I saved it from this one. That's I had a whole thing last night. We were at my one of our children in their school, and we had all the dads. We were talking all we were down the rabbit holes. Let's just say that. So,
hell yeah, dude. We can save that one for a future one. We can talk about aliens and UFOs and all that.
Oh my goodness. Seriously. Unreal stuff, man. Where can people find you? I'll link to the Declaration of Monetary Independence, things like that, but where can people find you to connect?
The only two I will provide, I haven't provided one of them very often. Somebody keeps honking outside. It's going to make me mad. So the main one would be Twitter. I just found out that a lot of people couldn't find me because of the text that I had in my name, not in the username, but in my name. It was all like italicized, like through this other app. So like it made me look, super special because it looked different for everybody else. I didn't realize that Twitter was using the name, in conjunction with what is used as a username in order for the search function. So people would go to search my name, and because my name was in a version of text that Twitter didn't recognize, it would come up as like just like blocks, like unknown emojis. That when people searched for me, they couldn't find me. So I've recently fixed that. The easiest way to find me is username would be the Mike Hobart. That's THEE. I emphasize the so you can get the double E, because like for whatever reason, whenever I say the Mike Hobart, people just type in the, and I'm like, no, I said the for a reason. Otherwise I would have said the Mike Hobart. Idiot. But then, so like you can search that, or you can just search Mike Hobart and I should pop up. But the other avenue that I haven't really talked about much is I do have an Instagram account where I use my Instagram as just like a public workout journal. Don't expect to see a whole lot of insight into my life on that, just because like I'm literally just posting like workouts.
Yep.
And like the username is the same over there. So like the Mike Hobart, you should be able to find me. But other than that, I have a Substack. My Substack is Just Hear Me Out. So just hear me out.substack. It should be the logo will be orange and black, and it says Just Hear Me Out. Over there is where I like to write about just the things that I'm thinking about. There's one that I might send to you. I don't think I sent it to you, that I would like to get your opinion on. And anybody that is more of like the religious kind of like people that like to talk about religion. Or like to think about religion. I have a series of writings about complex adaptive systems and how I believe that the universe and this is another thing we can talk about too.
Yeah, I know we didn't touch on Christianity or religion at all, really much. So
I have a theory
next time
that the main religions of the world, I have a theory that they found a way of looking at reality and the universe in a way that I have established, in the sense of it, like the universe as itself being a complex adaptive system, because it is maintaining homogeneity and balance and everything. And when you understand a complex adaptive system, you understand that every input and point of data within a complex adaptive system is valuable. Like every molecule that is moving through your body's a complex adaptive system. Every molecule that's moving through your body matters. It has an effect, which means that when you're looking at the universe, every single living thing matters and has an effect, because life is just a reorganization of energy. That's all that life is. So I have this theory, and I would like for your listeners to go like just find, there's 3 articles that the title says complex adaptive systems. It should be part 1, part 2, and part 2.5, to where I believe that both Christ and all of these other individuals had this revelation or epiphany or dawning upon them that everything in all of operation of the universe is connected in some way through this complex adaptive system, to the point of where you mix the complex adaptive system thinking, and then the other book that I forgot to plug earlier, The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. It's a book from her that I've realized that not many people have read. It's on the smaller side. It's not like Atlas Shrugged.
Yes.
But she gets into talking about the rational basis for morality. Like there is a rational function for morality. And she talks about that and I refer to it in my essays, to where when you have these understandings of these systems that are all playing together, I think that the major religions realized this kind of relationship, and they're like, oh, because like I think that when these individuals were thinking of God, I think that God was the complex adaptive system is itself, because when you look at a complex adaptive system and what it's doing as far as like taking in data and like maintaining homeostasis, it looks like intelligence. It is intelligence. Like the system itself is intelligence. Like a neural network is intelligence like itself. And I think that understanding that and understanding how morality supports that system continuing to grow and operate and become more efficacious and more efficient, I think that that's where the religions came from. It's just that their languages and their skill sets and their communications of the time were just so broad and vague compared to how they are now, that things are written in the Bible and in the Quran and all these different texts and tomes. They're written in the way that they are because that's the best way they communicate the message, right? Because that's a problem with language, is you can only communicate a thought in a way that is able to be expressed through the language with which you know.
Yeah.
So for anybody that does listen, I would love to get people's thoughts on that whole thing. It tends to piss people off. People don't like having their religions challenged, but I'm like, the way that I put the argument forward is I'm not necessarily challenging the religions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a better way of thinking about their religion.
Yeah.
So
all things can be true too, right? I mean, that's, again, this is
Yeah.
holding the opposing opinions in your head at the same time. I mean, there's not generally
absolutely.
one right answer.
Especially when you're talking about like the Holy Trinity, like this,
Right.
3 different systems working together in homeostasis. Like there's
Yep.
like nothing has to say that it was like an alien individual or 3 aliens or like some old man or woman in the sky like this sending down dictations. But yeah, I'll make sure to send that to you.
Yeah, for sure.
So I can get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff, brother. Appreciate you coming on, Mike. This is boy, this felt like we were on for a couple of minutes, and I can't wait to do it again, man.
Yeah, dude, I'm sweating from all this talking. Believe it or not.
Got your workout in, man. Jeez, I love it. No, great stuff, man.
Dude.
I appreciate you coming on, and I really look forward to doing it again soon here, man.
Absolutely. You just got to let me know when you want to do it.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
How'd you guys like that playable character? Mr. Mike Hobart. Again, one of my favorite people. I get to hang out with him a lot every single week on Spaces. We hang out a lot just on Twitter and sending things back and forth, and writing articles and things of that nature. Just one of the smartest people. I learned so much from him. Like I said, whether it's just from thinking about economics, thinking about health and fitness, and how I think about things. And again, I grew up with a health and fitness background, obviously being a professional athlete, but I'm still learning things every single day. We never stop learning, and I still learn things from Mike every single day. I learn things from all these people we have on about Bitcoin, about health, about fitness, about treating yourself right and refining how I'm thinking. Sometimes you slip as a human being, and people like Mike are those people that bring you back up and bring you right back to where you need to be. So I appreciate you, Mike. Thank you for coming on. I really look forward to doing this again soon. Maybe getting into a little more just the health and fitness side of things, even more, and some of his passions and what he's doing and what he's working on. One of the co-authors of the Declaration of Monetary Independence, which we spoke about, just incredible stuff, truly paving the way for the younger generations and America being a shining city on the hill because of Bitcoin. Bitcoin being the driver of that, the Constitution, Declaration 2.0, to give freedom and liberty and property rights and wealth to all 8 billion citizens. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you. Let me know your comments, your questions, your concerns. Send it here, and we'll have Mike on again. Take care till next time.